Hi guys, welcome to a new video. In this video, we're making the short pencil skirt. It has a lapel in front and lacing. If this is your vibe, keep watching. If you're just seeing this page for the first time, please don't make it your last. Hit on the subscribe button and turn on notifications. To my returning subscribers, thank you. And don't forget to like, share, comment, and turn on notifications so you'll be notified whenever I make a new post. These are the materials we'll be needing. I have about 2 yards of Ankara fabric and also your eyelets from your local fashion store. The first thing you're going to be doing is getting a pattern paper and folding it. So this skirt will be drafted on a pattern paper on fold. You're going to go ahead and rule a line which is going to serve as your waistline. Now this skirt has a band and the band is going to be 1.5 inch. So I'm going to be taking my measurement from 1.5 inch. So I'll take away 1.5 inch and measure my hip line, which is 10 inches. I'll also go ahead and measure the full length of this skirt, which is 18 inches. I added 1 extra inch as my seam allowance. I'll mark this point on the other side of this pattern paper so my lines will be straight. I'll go ahead and connect the point just like so. After doing that, I'll label this my hip line. This is my hip line, and then I will label that my skirt length. Now if you look at the style, you see that it has a lapel in front. So to get this lapel in front, I'm going to be adding an extra 5 inches to the original length of this skirt. So I'll mark my 5 inches. I'll also mark it here for the skirt extension, and then I'll use my ruler to rule it across. On my waistline, I'm going to be taking my waist circumference divided by 4. I'll mark a point there. I'll add an extra 1 inch for my dart intake and also 1 inch for my seam allowance. I'll move over to my hip line and take my hip circumference divided by 4 and 1 inch for my seam allowance. Now for the bottom line of this skirt, I'm going to be taking away 2 inches from whatever I have on my hip line. I'll take that measurement. You can choose to do 1.5, depending on how tight or loose you want your bottom part to be. I'll take the same measurement on the lapel line. And the next thing to do is to connect the points together. So I'll get my hip curve and I'll use it to connect the lines like so. After ruling my line, I realized I've made a mistake and I'm supposed to stop at my skirt length. So this is me just going back to stop the line at my skirt length and then connect it to the lapel line, just like so. So I'll just go ahead and indicate. So this line is cancelled and I'll be cutting along the other line. So this is how I'm going to be cutting this. So after tracing this out like so, to get my actual skirt, I'll be folding this lapel extension inside. I'm just rolling out the lines to the other side to enable me easily fold this in. So I'll just fold this in on the exact line that my skirt length stops, and I'll fold it back. So this is my skirt length. I'll get my fabric and then I'll place my pattern on top of it. You can go ahead and pin it down if you don't want it to move as you're cutting. After pinning this down, I'll go ahead and trace it out. I'll cut out exactly what I have on my pattern because I already added my allowance to it. Now for the back part of this skirt, I'm going to be taking out 1.5 inch, which I'll be labeling as my zipper allowance, and then I'll place the front away from the zip allowance because that's the difference between the front and the back piece. I'll also go ahead and pin this down so it will stay put when I'm trying to cut it out. I'll also go ahead and trace this out just like so, following the pattern. Now on my zip allowance, I'll extend the line from my hip line, and then on the waistline, I'll go in by 1 inch. I'll go down by 5 inch, and I'll also go in by 1 inch. And then I'll connect that 1 inch to the 1.5 inch that I have. This is just to give the skirt a little bum allowance. After doing that, I'll trace out the lines just like so. After doing that, I like to notch my zipper allowance so it will be easy for me to identify when I'm sewing. I'll also go out by 4 inches. This is me trying to notch my dart allowance. So where my dart will be, I'm just notching it so it will be easy for me to identify when I'm sewing. Now after I've gotten the full length of my skirt, I'll now go ahead and open this out to get my lapel. So this is my lapel. Now, if you look at the style properly, you will notice that the lapel is on the right side of the skirt. You can choose to make yours on the left side, but just go ahead and label your right and your left side. I'll go ahead and make my center line visible because that's where I'll be taking my measurements from. If you also look at the style, you'll see that the lacing goes a little bit to the left side of this skirt. So you can decide to go in by from 1.5 to 2.5 inch. I'm going to be going out by 2 inches. I'll be marking these 2 inches also on the hip line. Now, after doing that, you're also going to come down by 1 inch. From your hip line, go down by 1 inch. After doing that, you also go to the point where you've marked your 2 inches. You also go down by 1 inch. After doing this, you take your rule and then you connect all the points together in a straight line. After doing that, please pay attention. You go over to the left side and then you go out by 2.5 inch. Go out by 2.5 inch and also connect the points together with a straight line. I decided to rule my center line to the bottom so we'll not be confused. So that's just my center line. I'll go ahead and label center line. So basically what I've just done is to go out from my center line by 2 inches. This 2 inches is the starting point for my lacing. After which I'll be going out by 2.5 inch. This 2.5 inch will be the opening. And then there'll be eyelets on the opposite sides of the lines. The next thing I'm going to do is to connect this line to my hip line on the left hand side, just like so. So I'll connect this like this. After doing that, I'll go down to my lapel line, which is 5 inches. And then I'll go in by 1.5 inch. I decided to go in with 1.25 inch. You can decide to do 1.5 or 2 inches depending on how slant you want it to be. And then you connect that point that you have made on the bottom part of the skirt. You connect it to your hip line, just like I'm doing. I hope you understand what I'm saying. Please, if you don't, watch what I'm doing. After doing this, what's left is to connect this line to my original skirt length. Just like this. So you connect it to your original skirt length. Now after getting this, I'll be showing you the part that we are going to be cutting off. So this point I'm marking will be cut out and this point will be cut out. These are the parts that we don't need for this skirt. I also go ahead to properly label right and left. Now I'm going to carefully cut out on the lines and take out all the part that I've labeled. So this is how you are going to be cutting this. Please watch carefully. When you get to this point and then you connect to the original length of the skirt. So when you are done cutting, this is what you have. Now you're going to be placing, this is the right side, you're going to place it on a piece of fabric. Note that this fabric is not on fold. Unless you want to use the fabric as the lining, you're just going to be cutting out one piece. It is not on fold. I'll be using a lining piece to turn this out. But if you have enough fabric, you can also use the fabric as your lining. So this is the right side. I'll set it aside. And then for the left side, I'm also going to be cutting a single piece of this. Note that I'll be using a lining to turn this. You can only cut out two pieces of these if you are going to be using it as a lining. So I've just cut out one piece each. I'll be lining with my lining. I'll set this aside. So I'll go ahead and cut out my lining piece. The difference between the front and the lining is that the lining is shorter by 1 inch. And this is because I want it to have some sort of turnover effect. So this is it. This is what it looks like. As you can see, the lining is a little bit shorter. So this is exactly how it's going to look when you are done. For the back piece, you do exactly what you did for the front. You make the lining shorter by 1 inch. These are the back piece, and as you can see, the lining is a bit shorter than the actual fabric. Now for my lapel piece, I've also gone ahead to cut out lining piece, but for this one, the lining and the fabric is going to be exactly the same for both the left and the right side. If you look at it, you see that they are exactly the same. After joining the lining to the actual fabric and ironing, this is what it looks like. This is also what the back looks like. Now I'll go to my machine and close up the zipper allowance. Now this darting is for beginners. So if you're a beginner, this is exactly how you take your dart. You go out by 4 inch from the middle. You also go down by 6 inches and you rule a straight line across. After which you go out by ½ inch on both sides of the lines, just like you see me doing. You take a ruler to connect that line in a V-like manner to the ½ inch in front, just like I'm doing. So this is what you have. Now for the back piece, I've gone ahead to take in my dart, and this is what it looks like after ironing properly. After taking in my dart for the front piece, this is also what it looks like. This is what my lapel looks like after joining and ironing. Now you're going to mark your hip line, or you can choose to notch this point when you are cutting this lapel. You mark where your hip line is supposed to stop. After doing that, you're going to come down by 1 inch from your waistline, just like I'm doing. Whatever you do to the left, you do it to the right side. The next thing to do is to go in by ½ inch, because it doesn't look nice to place your eyelet exactly on the tip. So you go in by ½ inch before you place your eyelet. You mark a point there for your eyelet. After doing this, you'll be coming down by 1½ inch until you get to your hip line. So this is just me marking down 1½ inch until I got to my hip line. After doing this, you go ahead and repeat the process on the other side. Remember, whatever you do to the left, you also do to the right. So I'm still going with my tape to be very sure that it is exactly on the ½ inch point. Please make sure that the points you are making are very visible to you. I'm just going in to draw my chalk very hard so I can see the points properly. Now this is the eyelet. This is what it looks like. It comes in twos. So this is the front. You're going to place it like this, then you use the back, cover it. This is an eyelet plier. You use it to ply it down. And these eyelets can be gotten from any shop that sells tailoring materials. Now to place your eyelet, you need a small opening. So this is just me folding the fabric so I can get a tiny opening with my scissors. After opening it, I'll go ahead and take the front part of this eyelet. I'll press it in. After placing it, this is what it looks like from the front already. Now I'll take the back part and then I'll cover it. Remember, this eyelet comes in a pair. So after using the back part to cover, you're going to place your eyelet plier in the front, and then you're just going to clamp it. Clamp it hard. And this is the result. Your eyelet is ready. That's the back. So this is the process you'll be following for all the points you've made. I'm going to repeat the process in case you were not clear the first time. So after marking my points, you're just going to fold it like this so you can open it a little bit, just using your scissors a little bit to get the hole. Which you're going to be taking the bigger part of the eyelet, that's the front. You're going to take the back to cover it. You use your plier and you ply it in, you clamp it. That's all. You repeat this process until you are done placing eyelets on all of the points that you have made, and it is ready for lacing. After I was done, this is what it looks like. Our skirt is already coming together. Now the next thing to do is to place this on the right side of this skirt. This is exactly how you'll be placing it. So wrong side of the lapel to the right side of the skirt. After doing this, I'm going to take my pin and pin it down. Make sure you're arranging it properly before you pin it down. Then you go to your machine and stitch it down following the direction of my fingers. You do the same thing for the other side of the skirt. First things, you pin it down carefully. Then you go ahead and sew it from up to where it stops. After I was done, this is exactly what it's looking like for the front part of the skirt. What is left is to place the front and the back piece right side facing right side and put in your measurements. So I like to take my measurement from the middle of my skirt. You can do yours however you know how to do it, but I'll be taking my measurement from the middle. You take quarter part on both sides. You do that for the hip, you do that for the bottom part, and you do it for the waist. After marking my measurements, I'll use my hip curve so there will not be any sharp points. I removed ½ inch from my measurement just to make sure my skirt is snatched because I wanted it to be really snatched. So if you like the way that mine came out, you can do the same. After drawing my line, I'll go to my machine and sew this down. After sewing, this is what it looks like. This is the front of the skirt. The next step is to insert my band and my zip. I've cut out a piece that is longer than my waist. I ironed my interfacing to it. I folded it in a way that it's going to give me 1½ inch. Now I'll take the midpoint of my skirt. I'll notch it. I'll also get the midpoint of my band and I'll place it like so on the wrong side of the skirt. I'm going to go ahead and pin this down. You can go ahead and pin it to the end of your waistline. You do the same thing to the other side. This is me just pinning this down. I've gone to my machine to stitch this down. This is what it looks like. This is the back. See how neat it looks. Move over to the right side and then you stitch it down. I've gone to my machine to stitch this down. I also added my zip and this is how the skirt looks. It came out nicely, if I do say so myself. And now I'm going to quickly insert my lacing. Now to get your rope, you can fold a bias strip into two and then stitch it down. You can choose to use the fabric, whatever you choose, just make a strip out of it and pass it through your eyelets. I'll tie this down at the bottom and this is the way that it looks when I was done. This is what the skirt looks like when I was done. So this is how I wore it for a night out with the girls. If you've enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up, like, share, comment, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you'll be notified whenever I make a new post. See you in my next video. Bye.